Jarod Hamilton, Power Mizzou, here covering them Tigers.
Yeah.
What's one thing you want to learn from Drink at SEC Media Days?
Man, there's a handful of things I want to know. And everybody obviously wants to know what's the situation with the quarterbacks at this point with Jake Garcia, Sam Hornet, and Brady Cook. And we're probably not going to know that until a little bit later in fall camp.
Right.
But I want to know what's going on with the offensive line situation. They've got so many moving parts there, so many new players playing out of position, whether they were on the bench last year or they're transferring in. They got Cameron Johnson, all AAC player coming from Houston.
Mm-hmm.
He got the honor as a left guard. He'll be moving to center. They hope to have him be the starter. They've got Armand Membu, who was a true freshman last year, who played really well at right tackle. They're going to move him to right guard. And then they got Marcellus Johnson from Eastern Michigan. He had, I want to say, like 32 starts at Eastern Michigan. They're going to move him to right tackle, obviously, because they got Javon Foster as their mainstay. Yep. Left guard will be the position where it's like a true position battle between Xavier Delgado, who was the starter last year, and EJ and Doma Ogar, who was playing really well at right guard. He started a couple games, but he had like a lower leg injury that cut his season short. So I'm just interested to know how the line is coming together and how those players playing at different positions this year are doing so far.
What, do you think new offensive line coach helps or hurts? It may be tough to say till we know the offense too.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see a little bit of fall camp. We're gonna have to see the first couple games to understand it. But having Brandon Jones come from Houston and then Cameron Johnson, come in a couple weeks later after him, that definitely helps. And I don't know, maybe it's a situation of just having some new blood in there, kind of rejuvenate something, or they find out something maybe they couldn't get together, last year or something like that. But maybe we'll find out, first couple weeks of the season.
I don't know if you've seen it from Cousin Shane, but he's saying 10, maybe 11 wins. How would Power Mizzou react to a 10-win season in Columbia?
Oh, man, you're going to get people to hate me, man. I'm going to be honest. Every time I see the schedule, it's between 6-6 and up to 8-4.
Yeah.
Right now I'm probably at 7-5, but my thing is I think Kansas State, that's a game I have as a loss right now, and that's only because I don't know the quarterback situation with Missouri. Right. But Kansas State lost so many good players they had, whether they went to the draft or whatever it may be. They're kind of reeling. That doesn't mean, Chris Kleiman doesn't have new guys in there who can play, but they just lost so much talent. If I knew the situation at quarterback this year with Missouri, I think Missouri can win that game. I think it's a much more winnable game than maybe it was last year.
What's the biggest rivalry for Mizzou fans, you think? Because Arkansas, I know they don't want to claim it, but it feels like a rivalry to me. What do you think for Mizzou? Who's their biggest rival in the SEC?
It's Arkansas. Yeah. And the thing about this, and I wrote about this earlier in the offseason when they were throwing out the 9-game schedule and things like that. The reason I wrote Arkansas, that was my first one, is because that's a rivalry that's spread outside of football. They take that very seriously in basketball too, and in other sports. So no matter what, some of the fans are saying, it's really their biggest rival right now. That's who they're going at all the time.
Mm-hmm. Are you convinced that Drake is the right man for the job?
We're still finding that out. There's just always something wacky or something that just goes awry. Like last year, I believe they could have went 8-4.
And beat Auburn.
They should have definitely beat Auburn. I think the Kentucky game, they were coming back. I mean, they struggled in that first half. Brady Cook struggled in that first half. But he's the reason they got back and why they took the lead at one point. And then you had that weird block punt situation going on where it was a flag. And
that was stupid.
That was weird. And so that's 8-4. And that's not even counting the Georgia game where they were leading most of the way and they had it in hand. Although with Georgia, it just felt like it's Georgia. At some point, they were going to find their groove, and they were probably going to win it. But that was, again, another game where they were in it. So talking about an 8-4, potentially 9-3 team last year, even though their record says 6-6, I think they're better than what people say they are.
I want to ask you. Everybody knows Luther, and I love it, and I hate that he left. But who's somebody we should be keeping our eye on to step up and kind of play that role?
Oh man, it's still Luther, but here's the thing with the wide receiver position. This year, I feel the team is much more happier what they have in the group as a whole. Last year was a lot of trying to put a square peg in a round hole. They had a lot of people kind of playing out of position because they had, 3 of their top 4 receivers were slot guys: Barrett Bannister, Luther Burden, and Dominic Lovett. Lovett, he excelled in the slot last year, and Luther, he's so talented. You just got to get him on the field. So they played him outside, and then Barrett, when he was in the rotation, he got in the slot because that's just where he was best at. Now they moved Luther into the slot. They brought in it's slipping my mind. Theo Weiss. There we go. He's going to play outside, and I think he averaged like 19 yards per reception last year. Lovett averaged 15.2 or something like that last year, and he was the team's deep threat. So they got somebody who can stretch the field. They got Dennis Jackson, who used to play at Ole Miss. They believe he can play outside, he can play inside, and he's kind of like his playing style. I'm not going to call him that, but his playing style is similar to Luther, as in they want to give him the ball in space. Those are players they want to get in space and let them do their thing when they get out there. They got possession receivers like Mekhi Miller. He was a true freshman who there was a couple times last year when Barrett Bannister missed a game or something like that, or they needed a big third down. He came through in the clutch. Mookie Cooper, another person who can stretch the field. They got so many pieces there, and I haven't even got to maybe some of their the recent signee class. They got 4-star Joshua Manning, who may be able to squeeze in there and get a couple snaps and things like that. And I'm sure I'm missing some people, but they're much more comfortable with the depth in the wide receiver room and how the pieces fit into those positions.
Do you think Missouri's got the running back to excel this season? Because, Drake's had some great ones. Beatty, Roundtree, and I think even at Appalachian State he had a really good running back. Did his scheme make those running backs, or did those running backs kind of make the scheme? What do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. We're gonna figure that out this year. I think they got Cody Schrader. I believe he's gonna be the starter. He's just Mr. Consistency.
Right.
He may not break off a 40 or 50-yard runner type of guy, but what he won't do is he's not going to get tackled for a loss too many times. They had a kind of a problem with that, not just with the running backs, but the wide receivers sometimes too. Sometimes it was just honestly too much dancing behind, trying to make people miss and all that. Cody Schrader's always going to lean in and get you a few yards. He's always going to get you, 3 or 4 or 7 or 8 or something like that. He's consistent. Nate Pete, he's that guy who he has the breakaway speed. He can make plays on the outside and things like that. He just had a couple of fumbling issues last year and, the tackle for loss things. But someone that, maybe you can kind of see getting some snaps early on is actually a recent 3-star signee, Jamal Roberts. So they're kind of high on him. And they still got former 4-star Tavares Jones in there. So that running back room, you're going to see those guys actually get some snaps because after this year, Schrader and Pete are gone. So it's still going to be a by committee thing, but expect Schrader to start and the other guys to kind of complement him.
Do you think the pressure's on with Drink? Yeah, it feels like this should be a year. Now, I'm out here. I said 10. I don't know where 11, I think I retracted that one a little bit. But I think 10, best case scenario, stars align. That's what they got there in Mizzou. I love their defense. I love the secondary. You may have the best secondary in the country. So does that create more pressure? I know he just got an extension and everything, but that doesn't mean anything in SEC football. It feels like this is the year that Drink's expected to take that next step. Don't you agree?
Yeah. I would say this, though. I don't think it's if he goes 5-7 or something, I don't think it's necessarily a firing. There's context, and something Drink said a lot last year is, progress isn't always linear. So, context, when I mentioned those games they lost last year, if you just look at the record, you're 6-6, 500 again. But if you watch the games and you know what happened, you're okay. Some of that stuff isn't really what can you do about, your superstar kicker missing a 26-yard, chip field goal or, the bunt, block punt thing where no one kind of really knew the situation going on. So things like that, you got to play that into it. But
maybe one of those goal line stands that they punched it in against Georgia.
Georgia. Well, that was a big thing with the offensive line penalties as well as how many tackles for loss. I just said it was, the running backs and wide receivers had a part in that. A lot of that had to do, with the offensive line. They were, I cannot remember the exact placement. I want to say 118th in the FBS in tackles for loss allowed last year. They allowed 7.88, and so 91 for the regular season. So that's a lot of tackles for loss. But back to your original question, they do need to 7-5. That's not that great, but that's where it's looking like, all right, we've got to see the next step in wins this time. But I think for me, 9-3 is kind of like that's the dream scenario for them. 8-4 is kind of like this is a good one, but I've got them at 7-5 right now.
What's your confidence level that the defense can still be the strength of the team with inexperience at defensive end? Last year we had Isaiah McGuire on. I mean, that was our guy. He was arguably the best player on the team last year. He's gone to the NFL. How big of a concern is that for this defense?
Defensive end that will be something that I'll ask about. It doesn't seem like there's quite a couple guys where they're certain where you're just like, okay, this person's going to step in.
Yeah.
But they bring back 8 starters on the defense, and to me, I always kind of basically include 9 with Dalen Carnell because he played about 45% of the snaps as a redshirt freshman, and he led the team in takeaways with 5. He had 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. So
does his dad DM you too? He DMs us all the time. He's a great guy.
He's a cool guy for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you basically got 9 starters coming back.
We count them too.
Yeah,
we count them.
Yeah, so I think the defense is in a good spot. I think the biggest thing I want to know is kind of last year Blake Baker said when he came in, he kind of learned the defense they had in place. He didn't make everybody learn. He thought that was it just didn't make sense. So let him learn what they've got going on. And this year, how does he sprinkle that in? And with the defensive ends and kind of not knowing what you got as far as a pass rush, I wonder, does that mean more blitzes, from the linebackers or what you're doing with the safeties or whatever? And how much more will you lean on the secondary until you know exactly what you got at pass rush? Because they said something – I've heard some things about Darius Robinson possibly starting at defensive end from defensive tackle. If anybody's going to do it, it'd be him. But, how is that going to work,
What's one game you think Missouri fans want the most? That's maybe realistic. I'm not saying everybody wants to be Georgia,
right.
but of course they gave Georgia the best game, so you could include that. But is it Tennessee after they kind of ran up the score, Arkansas, Kentucky after that stupid punt, Kansas State? I don't know. What's one game you think Mizzou fans want the most this fall?
Because it's the closest one of all the ones you named, probably Kansas State.
Yeah.
That rivalry with the state of Kansas. For those who didn't know, I was born in Kansas. I was born 15.
So it's more personal.
Listen, and I try to tell people this all the time. So I was born 15 minutes from Kansas State, but I'm an Army brat. I lived everywhere. I didn't really live there too long. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's where I say I'm from. So, but people hear I'm from Kansas, they just assume all this stuff about me. I'm like, I don't care. I really don't. But that beef they got with the state of Kansas, so that includes Kansas State, they want that win, and that's going to kind of help determine how their season goes, because that non-conference schedule, or those first 5 games you include Vanderbilt, people are saying they should go 4-1. If you win that game, they go 5-0. So They got to get off to a quick start before they kind of get into that gauntlet.
Yeah, and that goes back to Shane. He's talking about the pressure because, man, we're seeing it. I know you're seeing it at Power Mizzou, but fans they expect to go into LSU 5-0. And like you said, at worst, 4-1. Maybe if Kansas State's really good again. And they're saying, hell, LSU's never won it for – I've heard that 20 times, probably a week the last 2 months. It sounds a little bit like you're saying, let's pump the brakes a little bit here. You don't want to step on people's enthusiasm.
No. I'm not saying they have to necessarily pump their enthusiasm, but my job is to be a realist.
Yeah. That's not our job. We just 10-0, 11-0.
I'll drink to that.
Now, just being – okay, so I'm curious to know. You said 11-1 or 10-2. What are those?
10-2 is like perfect season.
Okay, what's those 2 losses for you? Is it Georgia and LSU?
No, actually it was I went Georgia, and then I went back and forth to LSU and Tennessee.
Yeah, one of them. He says they're going to beat one of them.
Yeah.
You think they're going to beat Tennessee?
Well, I think it's one or the other.
Oh,
so
okay, I got you.
LSU or Tennessee.
Okay, I got you. Now, for my money, I think I think, what did I say what the score was? I wrote about it the other day, like a combined score of like 140 or 124 something to 48. That's how much Tennessee has outscored Missouri the last 2 games. So that seems like some type of puzzle they just can't get right. So I wouldn't pick Tennessee right now. But different year, that really is kind of irrelevant to this year. But it's hard to go off history that they could do that.
I just think the reason I was kind of leaning toward Tennessee is Tennessee they struggled when you had lockdown corners. And I think there's only a handful of teams that really could lock down Tennessee's wide receivers. The problem they ran into last year was just the depth. You guys just couldn't go the distance. And then once the floodgates open, now I feel like you got a little bit more. That's why I was kind of leaning toward that one, because you guys are a little bit deeper this year. And that I think that depth is going to be the one, like if you're picking one. LSU, I don't know. I just think
LSU that could just be nothing but hype. So
Yeah,
a lot
I
of
know,
teams
I
crumble
know,
with
I
hype,
know.
and they play Florida State right out the gate. They play, I think, Mississippi State and Arkansas before that. I mean, they got some landmines there.
Yeah, well, they all do. I mean, it's the SEC. You never. I mean, shit, they about beat Georgia. So I mean, there's landmines all over the place.
Right.
I think a lot of people sleeping on Mizzou this year. I think they sneak up and they're going to surprise somebody. There's going to be a signature victory this year. I just feel it.
Yeah.
It may be Tennessee, maybe LSU, maybe Georgia. I don't know, but it's going to be somebody.
Yeah.
And it better be Kansas State, right?
Right.
That one, because I like how your schedule starts, and that Kansas State just sitting there so early can derail that momentum, I think. I think that's a pivotal game, man.
Yeah, I mean, they get that 5-0, and they beat the reigning Big 12 champs, and that's obviously, like I just said, the big state rivalry thing going on. They're feeling hot, really good with that confidence going into facing LSU. So it'd be interesting to see.
I'm going to give you a layup to end with. Let's say Kansas was on the schedule this year. How many points does Missouri win that game by?
Yeah, you said it's a layup, 100.
Yeah.
That would actually be a good game, though.
Yeah.
Because Kansas wasn't. Were they 6-6 last year?
Yeah, they went to a bowl game.
Okay.
They lost to Arkansas.
Yeah, they played the Liberty Bowl, right? So
Right.
that'd actually be a better game. But realistically, I think Missouri could probably win that game by maybe a touchdown, 10 points or something like that. I'm feeling it.
And then,
No, I think
40 by the end.
I think it'd be a little bit more high scoring that people would expect, but it'd be a good game.
Trust me, nobody on this podcast likes Kansas, so you're good.
All right, Jarod, I really appreciate you. Before you go, tell the audience, where can they find all your work?
All right, you can follow me on Twitter at Jarod C. Hamilton. Follow my work at powermizzou.com. I actually just dropped my first long story type of thing on the 2013 Mizzou team that went to the SEC championship. Got to talk to James Franklin, Marcus Golden,
Nice.
USC offensive coordinator Josh Henderson. He just helped Caleb Williams get the Heisman. So I got to talk to a lot of people, and it appeared to be a great season. I love doing the research for that article.
All right, well, check it out, man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you
Thank you.
guys.